Namaskar and greetings of the day. Namaskar and greetings of the day to all the students watching this video. I, Twinkle Chandarana, Assistant Professor English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Open University. Welcome all of you in today's lecture. So friends, you might be wondering about the topic to be discussed in today's session. Well, today we are going to discuss an interesting, absurd play titled as a tragicomedy in 2 acts in detail along with its analysis. We will be discussing Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. So friends, first and foremost, let us have a look at the academic and personal biography of the writer. Samuel Beckett was born near Dublin, Ireland on April 13, 1906 into a Protestant middle-class home. Beckett is known to have commented, "I have little talent for happiness." This was evidenced by his frequent bouts of depression even as a young man. He often stayed in bed until late in the afternoon and hated long conversations. As a young poet, he apparently rejected the advances of James Joyce's daughter and then commented that he did not have feelings that were human. This sense of depression would show up in much of his writing, and especially in his work Waiting for Godot, where it is a struggle to get through life. Beckett journeyed through Ireland, through France, England, and Germany, and continued to write poems and stories. It is likely that he met up with many of the tramps and vagabonds who later emerged in his writing, such as the two tramps Estragon and Vladimir in Waiting for Godot. On his travels through Paris, Beckett would always visit with Joyce for long periods, and Beckett permanently made Paris his home in the year 1937. Shortly after moving there, he was stabbed in the street by a man who had begged him for some money. He had to recover from a perforated lung in the hospital. Beckett then went to visit his assailant who remained in the prison, and when Beckett demanded to know why the man had attacked him, he replied in French, "Je ne sais pas, monsieur." So, this attitude about life comes across in several of the author's later writings. He soon reached the pinnacle of his writing career, producing the play Waiting for Godot, the plays like Eleutheria, Endgame, the novels Malloy Mullen Dies, The Unnameable, and Mercier at Camere, two books of short stories as well as a book of criticism. Samuel Beckett's first play was Eleutheria and involved a young man's efforts to cut himself loose from his family and social obligations. This has often been compared to Beckett's own search for freedom. Beckett's great success came on January 5th in the year 1953 when Waiting for Godot premiered at the Theatre de Babylon. Although critics label the play as the strange little play in which nothing happens, it gradually became a success as reports of it spread through word of mouth. It eventually ran from 400 performances at the Theatre de Babylon and was heralded with critical praise from dramatists such as Tennessee Williams, Jean Anouilh, Thornton Wilder, and William Sarolon. Saroyan even remarked that it will make it easier for me and everyone else to write freely in the theatre. An interesting production of Waiting for Godot took place when some actors from the San Francisco Actors Workshop performed this play at the San Quentin Penitentiary for over 1,400 convicts in 1957. The prisoners immediately identified with both Vladimir and Estragon about the pains of waiting for life to end and the struggle of the daily existence. The production was perhaps the most successful ever, and Becke's second masterpiece, the play Endgame, premiered on April 3rd, 1957 at the Royal Court Theatre in London. All of Becke's major works were written in French language. He believed that French forced him to be more disciplined and to use the language more wisely. However, Waiting for Godot was eventually translated into English language by Becke himself. Samuel Becke also became one of the first absurdist playwrights to win international fame. His works have been translated into over 20 languages, and in the year 1969, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature, one of the few times this century that almost everyone agreed the recipient deserved this award. He continued to write until his death in the year 1989, but towards the end he remarked that each word seemed to him an unnecessary stain on silence and nothingness. Waiting for Godot qualifies as one of Becke's most famous works, and this play was originally written in French in 1948. Becke personally translated the play into English. The play's reputation spread slowly through word of mouth and it soon became quite famous. The other productions around the world rapidly followed. The play initially failed in the United States, likely as a result of being misbilled as The Laugh of Four Continents. A subsequent production in New York City was more carefully advertised and it garnered some success too. Friends, let me make you familiar with the historical context of this play, Waiting for Godot. The play is set in a strange, unspecified time and does not take place in the context of any historical events, but many have seen the widespread suffering and disillusionment caused by World War II in the background of the play's pessimistic, nihilistic conception of the world. While talking about other books related to this play, Waiting for Godot, while the play generally does not allude to other pieces of literature, Becke was likely influenced by Berenice, a 17th century play by the French playwright Jean Racine, whom Becke studied, and in which Racine stressed the importance of making an interesting play out of a little bit of action. Becke was also probably influenced by Sartre's play No Exit, in which characters are trapped in one location. Waiting for Godot has also been seen as being an influence for Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Becke originally wrote this play Waiting for Godot in French under the equivalent title Un Attendant Godot. He said that writing in French made it easier to write in the blank, plain style for which the play is famous. Becke later personally translated this into English, and while Godot is such an important part of the play, there is widespread disagreement over the correct pronunciation of this name. Some opt for stressing the first syllable God, while emphasizes the name's link to God, and while others choose to stress the second God. This play incorporates many of the themes and ideas that Becke had personally discussed in his other writings. The use of the play format allowed Becke to dramatize his ideas more forcefully than before, and is one of the reasons that the play is so intense. Becke often focused on the idea of the suffering of the being. Most of his play deals with the fact that Estragon and Vladimir are waiting for something to alleviate their boredom. Godot can be understood as one of the many things in life that people wait for. The play has often been viewed as fundamentally existentialist in its take on life. The fact that none of the characters retain a clear mental history means that they are constantly struggling to prove their existence on the earth. Thus, the boy who consistently fails to remember either of the two protagonists doubt on their very existence. This is why Vladimir demands to know that the boy will in fact remember them the next day. Waiting for Godot is part of the theater of the absurd, and this implies that it is meant to be irrational. Absurd theater does away with the concepts of drama, chronological plot, logical language, themes, and recognizable settings. There is also a split between the intellect and the body within the work. Thus, Vladimir represents the intellect and Estragon the body, both of whom cannot exist without the other. Friends, this play is divided into two acts, and we shall discuss the summary of both of the acts in detail. Talking about the summary of Act 1, the setting is in the evening on a country road with a single tree present. Estragon is trying to pull off his boot but without success, and Vladimir enters and greets Estragon, who informs him that he has spent the night in a ditch where he was beaten. With supreme effort, Estragon succeeds in pulling off his boot. He then looks inside it to see if there is anything there, while Vladimir does the same with his head. Vladimir mentions the two thieves who were crucified next to Christ. He asks Estragon if he knows the Gospels, and Estragon gives a short description of the maps of the Holy Land, at which point Vladimir tells him he should have been a poet. Estragon points to his tattered clothes and says he was. Vladimir continues with his narrative about the two thieves in order to pass the time. Estragon wants to leave, but Vladimir forces him to stay because they are both waiting for Godot to arrive. Neither of the two bums knows when Godot will appear, or even if they are at the right place. Later, it is revealed that they do not know even what they originally asked Godot for and why they are waiting for him. Estragon gets bored of waiting and suggests that they pass the time by hanging themselves from the tree. They both like the idea but cannot decide who should go first, and they are afraid that if one of them dies, the other might be left alone. In the end, they decide it is safer to wait until Godot arrives. Estragon asks Vladimir whether they still have rights, and Vladimir indicates that they got rid of them. He then fears that he hears nothing, but it turns out to be imaginary noises. Vladimir soon gives Estragon a carrot to eat, and Pozo and Lucky meantime arrive. Lucky has a rope tied around his neck and is carrying a stool, a basket, a bag, and a greatcoat. Pozo carries a whip and uses it to control Lucky. Estragon immediately confuses Pozo with Godot, which gets Pozo upset. Pozo spends several minutes ordering Lucky around, and Lucky is completely silent and obeys like a machine. Pozo makes Lucky put down the stool and open the basket of food, which contains the food chicken. Pozo then eats the chicken and throws away the bones, and Lucky stands in a stooped posture holding the bags after each command has been completed and appears to be falling asleep. Estragon and Vladimir go to inspect Lucky, who intrigues them. They ask why he never puts his bags down, and Pozo will not tell them, so Estragon proceeds to ask if he can have the chicken bones that Pozo has been throwing away. Pozo tells him that they technically belong to Lucky, but when they ask Lucky if he wants them, he does not reply. So Estragon is given the bones, and Pozo eventually tells them why Lucky hold the bags the entire time. He thinks it is because Lucky is afraid of being given away, while Pozo tells them why Lucky continues to carry his bags. Lucky starts to weep. Estragon goes to wipe away the tears but receives a terrible kick in the shin. Pozo then tells them that he and Lucky have been together nearly for 60 years, and Vladimir is appalled at the treatment of Lucky, who appears to be such a faithful servant. Pozo explains that he cannot bear it any longer because Lucky is such a burden. Later, Vladimir yells at Lucky that it is appalling the way he treats such a good master. Pozo then gives an oratory about the night sky. He asks them how it was, and they tell him it was quite a good speech. Pozo is ecstatic at the encouragement and offers to do something for them. Estragon immediately asks for 10 friends, but Vladimir tells him to be silent. Pozo offers to have Lucky dance and then think for them. Lucky dances for them, and when asked for an encore, repeats the entire dance step for step. Estragon is unimpressed but almost falls trying to imitate it. They then make Lucky think. What follows is an outpouring of religious and political doctrine, which always starts ideas but never brings them to completion. The three men finally wrestle Lucky to the ground and yank off his head, at which point he stops speaking. His last word is unfinished. The man then spends some effort trying to get Lucky to wake up again. He finally reawakens when the bags are placed in his hand. Pozo gets up to leave, and he and Lucky depart the scene, while Vladimir and Estragon return to their seats and continue waiting for Godot. A young boy arrives having been sent by Mr. Godot. Estragon is outraged that it took him so long to arrive, and it scares him. Vladimir cut him off and asks the boy if he remembers him. The boy says this is his first time coming to meet them, and that Mr. Godot will not be able to come today, but perhaps tomorrow. The boy is sent away with the instructions to tell Mr. Godot that he has seen them. Both Estragon and Vladimir discuss past events, and then they decide to depart for the night. Neither of them moves from his seat. So, this was all about Act 1. Now, let's move towards the summary of Act 2. The setting in the next day is at the same time, and Estragon's boots and Lucky's bat are still on the stage. Vladimir enters and starts to sing until Estragon shows up barefoot. Estragon is upset that Vladimir was singing and happy even though he was not there. Both admit that they feel better when alone, but convince themselves that they are happy when they are together. They are still waiting for Mr. Godot. Estragon and Vladimir poetically talk about all the dead voices they hear. They are haunted by voices in the sounds of nature, especially of the leaves rustling. Vladimir shouts at Estragon to help him not hear the voices anymore, and Estragon tries and finally decides that they should ask each other questions. They manage to talk for a short while. Estragon has forgotten everything that took place the day before. He has forgotten all about Pozo and Lucky, as well as the fact that he wanted to hang himself from the tree. He cannot remember his boots and thinks that they must be of someone else. For some reason, they fit him now when he tries them on. The tree has sprouted leaves since the night before, and Estragon comments that it must be spring. But When Vladimir looks at Estragon's sheen, it is still pussy and bleeding from where Lucky kicked him. Soon, they are done talking and they try to find another topic for discussion. Vladimir finds Lucky's hat and tries it on. He and Estragon spend a while treading heads until Vladimir throws his own hat on the ground and asks how he looks. They then decide to play at being Pozo and Lucky, but to no avail. Estragon leaves only to immediately return panting. He says that they are coming. Vladimir thinks that it must be Godot who is coming to save them. He then becomes afraid and tries to hide Estragon behind the tree, which is too small to hide him. The conversation then degenerates into abusive phrases. Estragon says, "That's the idea, let's abuse each other." They continue to hurl insults at one another until Estragon calls Vladimir a critic. They embrace and continue waiting. Pozo and Lucky enter, but this time Pozo is blind and Lucky is mute. Lucky stops when he sees the two men. Pozo crashes into him and they both fall helplessly into a heap on the ground. Vladimir is overjoyed that reinforcements have arrived to help him with the waiting. Estragon again thinks that Mr. Godot has arrived. Vladimir and Estragon discuss the merits of helping Pozo get off the ground where he has fallen. When Vladimir asks how many other men spend their time in waiting, Estragon replies that it is billions. Pozo, in desperation, offers to pay for help by offering 100 francs. Estragon says that it is not enough, and Vladimir does not want to pick up Pozo because then he and Estragon would be alone again. Finally, he goes over and tries to pick him up but is unable to. Estragon decides to leave but decides to stay when Vladimir convinces him to help first and then leave. While trying to help Pozo, both Vladimir and Estragon fall and cannot help get up. When Pozo talks again, Vladimir kicks him violently to make him shut up, and Vladimir and Estragon finally get up, and Pozo resumes calling for help. They go and help him up. Pozo asks who they are and what time it is. They cannot answer his questions. Estragon goes to wake up Lucky. He kicks him and starts hurling abuses until he again hurts his foot. Estragon sits back down and tries to take off his boot. Vladimir tells Pozo his friend is hurt. Vladimir then asks Pozo to make Lucky dance or think for them again. Pozo tells him that Lucky is mute. When Vladimir asks since when, Pozo gets into rage. He tells them to stop harassing him with their time questions since he has no notion of it. He then helps Lucky to get up and they leave. Vladimir reflects upon the fact that there is no truth and that by tomorrow he will know nothing of what has just passed. There is no way of confirming his memories since Estragon always forgets everything that happens to him. The boy arrives again but does not remember meeting Estragon or Vladimir. He tells them it is his first time coming to meet them. The conversation is identical in that Mr. Godot will once again not be able to come but will be sure to arrive tomorrow. Vladimir demands that the boy be sure to remember that he saw him. And Vladimir yells, "You are sure you saw me? You won't come and tell me tomorrow that you never saw me." The two bums decide to leave but cannot go far since they need to wait for Mr. Godot. They look at the tree and contemplate hanging themselves. Estragon takes off his belt but it breaks when they pull on it and his trousers fall down. Vladimir says that They will hang themselves tomorrow unless Godot comes to save them. He tells Estragon to put on his trousers. They decide to leave, but again they do not move. So, friends, towards the end of the lecture, I hope that you all would have understood the overview of this play, and we shall continue to discuss certain other important aspects of this play like themes, characterization, as well as the relevance of the play in the next lecture. Till then, thank you.